Hello and welcome. I'm Professor Rasmussen. I'm here to talk about Chapter 6, Emotional Intelligence. In this talk, we're going to talk about emotional intelligence and psychopathy, as well as how does that relate to empathy. As you can see from my introduction, I don't have much emotion, and that's fine, because this is somewhat how people who are psychopathic or people who lack empathy may feel at times. All right, I can't keep this up. I need to get some emotion here. I need to get something going in me. Let's get going. Psychopathy, what is it? Well, psychopathy is oftentimes described as a state where an individual lacks remorse, so they don't care about their actions. They don't feel bad for what they did. They have a great ability to deceive, lie to people, disregard for others, they don't care about others, and they lack empathy, meaning that they don't feel any bond, any sort of anything for another individual. They can't basically put themselves into another person's shoes. Now, who is a character who maps onto this? Well, here's an individual from No Country for Old Men, Anton. Anton's a character of a hitman slash psychopathic killer who is one badass dude, okay? Um, at first glance, you might be like, he's a pretty big guy. He looks kind of, he probably knows how to tangle. You know, uh, Upon seeing the rest of the movie, you probably don't want to meet him. Okay, there he is. He's a cold-blooded killer. All right. So solid movie, shows what a psychopathic individual would look like, how they deceive, how they can lie to you, how they can look like they're normal in some situations while being completely abnormal, on many facets of life. So there is a great example. There's many others examples in history, say potentially John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer, as well as others who definitely fit the bill for psychopathy. Now, are all psychopathics or people who have psychopathy, are they serial killers? Hell no, they're not. Okay, you need to know that. They're not all serial killers. They're not all killers. They're not all violent even. They just could be mean and have a disregard for others. Okay, so these are some important things, but psychopathy displayed, to a T in a stereotypical sense, this is psychopathy. All right, let's keep going though. Psychopathy and how it relates to emotional intelligence. Well, in clinical prison samples, as you can see there from that picture on the right, psychopathy is related to a decrease in emotional intelligence. So, people who are psychopathic, that's a clinical sample, people who are in prisons, they oftentimes score lower on emotional intelligence exams. Oh yeah, that totally makes sense. Duh, right? Because like that picture shows, that person who's in the Department of Corrections, the DOC, get up in the orange, that person's mean, okay? And he's being mean to his to his correction facility agent, right? You got that little guy, he's got some tats on his hand and everything. He's got his goatee looking all mean. He's got his bottle in his right hand. Oh, he ain't messing around, right? So this is what researchers have found, that oftentimes there's a negative correlation between EI and an individual's psychopathy. Now, are people who are psychopathic the way they are because of a lack of empathy? No. No, no, no. Here's a reason why. So people can lack empathy and have no violence slash psychopathy. There's actually a term for this. This is called alexithymia. Alexithymia is a reduction in empathy. Now, normal people, people without psychopathy, just, people like you and I. I've probably had a few students along the way, probably many more than that. It's like a large sample, it's a large proportion, larger than you'd actually think of the population, maybe even into the, 5 to 10, maybe even a little bit higher percent of the population may suffer from, not necessarily suffer from, but be diagnosed with alexithymia, the inability to experience empathy for others. Have this sense that you can put yourself into someone else's shoes. So what researchers have found in a general sample, not a clinical sample, general, this would be like college-age students, psychopathy and alexithymia were only mildly correlated. So what this is saying is that you can have alexithymia and you can have psychopathy, but that doesn't mean that if you have one, you're automatically going to have the other. So a lot of people exist by just having psychopathy, and a lot of people exist by just having alexithymia, and they're separate from one another. Okay, but both of them lack may or may not lack empathy. Okay, so here's a really good article published by the Frontiers in Human Neuroscience, any journal, the Frontiers, solid journal, and is very very credible. So this is research that came out a couple years ago, 2013, way more than a couple years ago, but nonetheless still prevalent. And let's get talking about it. So it's called Dissecting Empathy. High levels of psychopathic and autistic traits are characterized by difficulties in different social information processing domains. So this is a really cool article. It's going to look at psychopathy as well as autism. All right. So autism oftentimes characterized by an individual who lacks empathy. They also seem to like rules. They like to have strict order in their daily routine. They may even have problems with communication, problems taking the perspective of another individual, knowing that other people have different viewpoints than them. They may engage in self-stimulating behaviors. There's all sorts of things that are associated with autism. So, what researchers did, let me go back here, sorry about that. Psychopathy is associated with a degraded sense of empathy, but so is autism spectrum disorder, as I was just saying. So is there any relation between psychopathy and ASD? Well, I'm going to tell you no, and researchers are going to look at what are the specific detriments to each of these involving empathy. So the sample consisted of 110 college-age students. They were assessed for their psychopathy, ASD, that's autism spectrum disorder, as well as the alexithymia, a lack of just straight empathy. They measured by way of correlational analysis. So we're going to take a look at all the data, and it's going to be correlational analysis. Now, before I start looking at the data and showing you the data, I want to tell you that it's kind of complex, but it's not really too bad. So just pay attention, and I'm going to show some pictures in a moment, some like Venn diagrams that should really, really help you out. Okay, so as predicted, psychopathic traits showed a statistically significant negative correlation with performance on the affective resonance task, meaning the understanding task. So overall, what researchers found is that the psychopathic traits were negatively correlated with understanding. So as you increase in psychopathic traits, you have a decreased understanding of empathy, of others' emotions. That makes sense. And it was correlated at a negative 0.26 correlation coefficient. So a mild, kind of weak to mild correlation value. The p-value just says that it's significant, statistically significant. So if you have a very low p, something less than 0.05, it's statistically significant. And what statistically significant means is that it was not likely caused by chance. So this correlation coefficient was not likely caused by chance. There's probably some accuracy here, and this is probably a legit correlation coefficient between these two variables, psychopathy and understanding. Now, the interesting thing is ASD, though, did not seem to correlate significantly with an understanding. So if you have, ASD, it was negative, but it could have been negative 0.1, it could have been positive 0.1. Why? Because it's not statistically significant. Researchers aren't very accurate. They're not very, how do I say this, certain that that's the legit correlation coefficient for the relationship between ASD and understanding on a task. All right, and this was even when taking into consideration alexithymia for both of these, for psychopathy and ASD. So let me show you what this is talking about. So affective resonance. Affective resonance is the ability to understand others. Okay, it's almost like this empathy thing. All right, it's the ability to understand and kind of draw yourself into another individual. So psychopathy was related to affective resonance, okay, but only mildly, right? Because it's there's negative correlation, so negatively correlated together. Also, though, ASD is also related to affective resonance, but it's a lot less. So, matter of fact, I probably should have drawn the ASD circle being even outwards further. Let me do that right now, actually. I can change that really quick. I want to make this certain here. That's good. Thank you for bearing with me. See, this is the things I can just do behind the scenes right now, or actually in front of the scenes, really. So there you have it, okay? ASD, slightly related to affective resonance. But now you got alexithymia, and it's probably related to all these at some level. But maybe this helps you understand that psychopathy is somewhat related negatively to affective resonance. ASD, not so related to affective resonance, and alexithymia is kind of like related to all of these still. That's what is proposed, okay? Alright, so let's take a look here. Now, conversely, ASD traits showed a statistically significant negative correlation with performance on a cognitive perspective taking task. So the cognitive perspective taking task would be, have to watch another individual and, they go through their daily actions and maybe you have to say, like, what are they thinking? So you have to put yourself in someone else's shoes, not emotionally, but mentally to think about what they're thinking cognitively as opposed to emotionally. Now, the psychopathic traits did not correlate significantly with cognitive perspective taking. So, what does this mean? Is well, perspective taking, ASD slightly negatively correlated with perspective taking, meaning that if you have ASD, you're going to be a little worse at perspective taking than if you didn't have ASD. Psychopathic, there you have it. Very low problems with perspective taking. So the problems that they have with perspective taking are probably very minimal for psychopathy. But alexithymia, alexithymia is related to ASD. It might be related to perspective taking as well as psychopathy. But alexithymia and perspective taking probably aren't that well correlated. So alexithymia is just there. It's not doing much. Okay? So you kind of get the point. Perspective taking, bigger problems with ASD, less problems with psychopathy. You go back to the prior one, affective resonance, large problems with psychopathy, also probably large problems with alexithymia, but kind of very few problems with ASD. Okay? Alright, so those are the two overall main findings. So therefore, all three seem to be somewhat separate from another. This is what the researchers Lockwood and colleagues noted. Psychopathy seems to be kind of clear and distinct in that it is a reduced tendency to feel what others feel. And so that would be that affective resonance, the understanding of others. That would almost be that empathy thing. Alexithymia is a reduced ability to identify and describe feelings. Well, wait, isn't that empathy? Well, wow, here's the thing. They both deal with empathy. Psychothymia, that's an awesome disorder that I just totally termed right there. Psychopathy and alexithymia. Psychopathy deals with empathy on the level of understanding others and being able to understand what an individual is doing. Alexithymia, these individuals seem to have an inability to identify and describe feelings. So what's going on here is the alexithymia people, they don't seem to identify and even be able to describe emotions. Whereas the person who is having psychopathy, they might be able to describe and identify emotions, but they can't understand and feel what the other person is feeling. So kind of interesting differences between psychopathy and alexithymia. On the other hand, ASD, autism spectrum disorder, is oftentimes, well, in this research, is more associated with an inability to take the perspective of another. They have totally fine levels in this research. It seemed to be perfectly normal levels of understanding as well as describing feelings of others. So their empathy may not actually be as degraded as once believed. So, in general, what is this research suggesting? It's suggesting that psychothymia, oh my gosh, I did it again. Psychopathy is related to problems with EI. We already talked about that. Okay, so psychopathy, high psychopathy, low EI. People who have psychopathy have some problems with empathy. Okay, maybe therefore an EI includes aspects of empathy, understanding feelings of others. So it's possible that the EI also takes into consideration empathy. However, people can have problems with empathy and not either be psychopathic or diagnosed with ASD. Okay, so that would be that alexithymia where these people come into play. So this is kind of the difference between psychopathy, alexithymia, and ASD. I really hope that's been helpful, and maybe you can use this in future classes if you have like some sort of criminal justice or some forensic psychology class in another school. Thanks for tuning in, and whoa, I'm not sure where this is going. This is just fast forwarding all the way to intelligence, general intelligence. Thanks for tuning in, by the way, and have a great day.